Well, hello and welcome to one of our last sessions, our last Zoom sessions in 110 Acoustics. Today it is April the 15th, my sister's birthday, and April 15th, 2019, and we are now looking at Unit 6, the upward spread of masking. We will only spend 1 week on this unit. Next week would be Unit 7. And Unit 7 is the final unit of the course, and Unit 7 is called Non-Electronic Acoustic Modifications. Whoa, what does that mean? Things in hearing aids. So we're going to get to hearing aids, the shapes and sizes of hearing aids and what those things do to the sound. Not the electronics inside. That's a different topic. But this topic would be on what the shapes and sizes of hearing aids do to the sound, due to their mass, their stiffness, all the stuff we've talked about in acoustics. So we will apply that to hearing aids. And I'll show you some examples and things like that by holding them up and showing them to you. But that's mañana. Today, Unit 6, Upward Spread of Masking. And by the way, next week, Tuesday, would probably be the 23rd of April, and I'll be gone to Holland. I'll be in the Netherlands on the 23rd and the 30th, both of those Tuesdays. So I will have to be recording Unit 7, Non-Electronic Acoustic Modifications, on other days. And I'll tell you, I'll keep you apprised by email. And by the way, today isn't even Tuesday, so you're probably wondering what the heck is going on. Well, tomorrow I'm on a radio show in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So I'm unable to record the Zoom session at our usual 11:30 Central Time on Tuesday. That's why I'm recording this on Monday. So no one's attending because I haven't told anybody about it, so I'm just doing this. I'll send an email, of course, out to everybody right after this session. So here goes. Non-electronic acoustic modifications would be next week. Today, upward spread of masking. In short, low frequencies mask or cover high frequencies better than high frequencies mask or cover low frequencies. So let's look. We'll share screen. And we'll get to our PowerPoint and our notes. First, the notes. I'll make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it mo better. Psychoacoustics, masking, critical bands, binaural masking level differences. Woo. Reed Lassen, Woodford, Chapter 6. Masking. Nothing to do with Halloween. Masking is any sound that covers or hides another sound from being heard. Now in audiometry, masking sound is put into the opposite, the good ear, to eliminate it from participating. And that's called contralateral masking. Let's see if I can show you by way of a diagram here. I'll make it bigger, the PowerPoint. So here's what we do in audiometry. Here's a picture. Okay? When presenting a loud tone to a bad ear, masking is done when there's one ear that's way worse than another. Okay, say somebody's right ear is good and the left ear has a real bad hearing loss. Well, if you put a lot of sound, and I'll stop sharing for just a second so we can talk about it and you can look at me, okay? Let's say this ear is really bad and this ear is normal. This ear can hear all the way down to 0, this ear way more, okay? If I put 10 in, won't hear it. 20 in, won't hear it. 30 in, won't hear it. 40 in, won't hear it. 50 in, won't hear it. 60, I'm going to hear it with this ear. Because 60 was enough to cross my skull by bone conduction and get to the good ear. And I'm going to raise my hand. It's called cross hearing, okay? Your head isn't made out of cement. It's a pail that can only hold so much water. And after you pour too much water and it spills over. You can think about it that way, okay? So if I put enough sound into a dead, deaf ear, it's going to cross my skull and get to the good ear. And it'll cross my bone conduction, okay? So I have to keep this good ear busy with masking noise. And I tell the client, I'm going to put some windy noise into your good ear. Don't listen to that. That's just to keep your good ear busy. Let me know when you hear the tone in your bad ear. Okay? That's called masking. And you will be doing it when you're testing clients. Not if the ears are the same, but if one ear is good and the other ear is really bad, you have to use masking to keep the good ear busy so that the sound here can't cross over. Okay? Now that's what we call contralateral masking. You're putting the masking in one ear and you're testing with the tone in the other ear. And that's the picture that I showed you here, okay? Presenting a tone to a bad ear. And look at this, you got an ear canal, middle ear, malleus, incus, stapes, cochlea, and it might cross over to the good ear. So masking noise is put into the good ear to keep it busy. Now, all that's fine and dandy, but that's not what we're talking about today. Okay? What we're talking about today is ipsilateral masking. Okay? In other words, when presenting a tone to one ear, how much masking is required to cover that tone in the same ear? Or if you did it in both ears. Okay? Masking, presenting a tone to both ears by way of a speaker. How much noise coming from the speaker is required to mask or cover that tone? Okay, so this picture and this picture are talking about putting masking noise into the same ear as the tone, and that's done for research. Okay, and you and I, we don't do that. We do this. Masking in clinical audiometry, this is what we do. But we're not talking about this today. Right now, we're talking about upward spread of masking. Okay, so whether the tone was put in one ear, how much masking noise was required to cover your perception of that tone in that ear, or whether noise was put in both ears, or a tone in blue was put in both ears from a speaker, and how much masking noise from that same speaker was required to mask or cover your perception of that tone. So now, without any further ado, you're looking at inner hair cells and you're looking at outer hair cells, inner hair cells and damaged outer hair cells, that active cochlear mechanism that you can see here, okay? And then we talked about traveling waves in anatomy class, how waves occur stimulating these hair cells here, or the wave could stimulate these hair cells here. Okay, and then we talked about the outer hair cell sharpening that traveling wave. They amplify it and they pull it into a point, and that's done by this action here. Okay, and this action here is done on either side of this and here to squeeze it into a point. All right, so here this picture is showing you sort of a view of this and this. Okay, it's same thing. Showing you a traveling wave stimulating low-frequency hair cells, and it would stimulate lots of them, but the action of the outer hair cells serves to amplify and sharpen. And note here that the traveling wave envelope in orange is shaped like a kite. Okay, always remember that. The front of the wave is steep and faces the low frequencies, in other words, the apex of the cochlea, and the tail is shallower and slopes toward the base, the high frequencies. And this is simply the cochlea unrolled, okay? And again, you've seen this in anatomy, and you're seeing it here. Two traveling waves of two frequencies close together. Then now you've got the loss of outer hair cells. And when you put a hearing aid on that person, you're making this middle wave bigger, but you're not restoring the peaks. That can't be done anymore. Remember that? So, anyway, then we talked about eighth nerve fibers coiled like a rope. Lows inside, highs outside, and you'll remember that from anatomy and acoustics. We talked about tuning curves and how the eighth nerve is also tonotopic, just like the cochlea. And we described these tuning curves as having points. And we said this is frequency, and this is the intensity required to get one particular neuron fiber to fire. In other words, if you picked one of these thousands of fibers, just pick 6 of them, And you could do tuning curves on them. Measure the intensity of sound required to get some particular neuron fiber to fire. And you can see this point is here, this point's a little higher in frequency, this point covers a little higher in frequency, and so on, and so on, and so on. Note that they too, like the traveling wave, are asymmetrical. Okay? And we said that the orange, this red here, is like the damage done, like this, you lost your outer hair cells, and that is reflected or echoed further up the system in terms of tuning curves. Now, no longer the black would be normal. No longer you need more intensity to get that neuron fiber to fire, but also the tuning curve is more dull and rounded. In other words, other frequencies besides just one can get that same neuron fiber to fire at roughly similar intensities. So the whole system is less finely tuned. Remember that? Here's what we're talking about today. And look at the picture carefully. Pretend you've got a low frequency sound and a high frequency sound. And in this picture, the low frequency sound has more intensity and the high frequency sound is softer. Okay? So pretend this is a rumbling of a truck outside your house. And here is the soft peeping of a canary inside your kitchen. Well, the rumble of a truck, look at the envelope, can easily cover or mask the envelope made by the high frequency peeping of the canary. So lows can mask highs much better than highs can mask lows, because in this picture, the truck is rumbling at a soft level, and the canary is really being hairy. She's just mad as hell. And so her peeping is really loud. So she's made a loud high frequency sound. But look, it's not getting out to cover this because it stops here. Do you see? It's the shape of the traveling wave, the asymmetrical shape of the traveling wave that makes for the fact that lows mask highs better than highs mask lows, because this light blue isn't being involved at all out here. And that's a big problem with hearing aid wearers, because background noise is mostly low frequency. Traffic, the hubbub and babble of background party speech babble, most music, thumping, blah, 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 blah. You know, most background noise is low frequency. And what's the most important sound for a hearing aid wearer to hear? Speech. And what parts of speech? High frequency consonants. So background noise is like the bull in the china shop, and the high frequency consonants are like the little teacups. Okay? Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. So background noise is quite an effective masker or coverer of audibility of high frequency consonants, which are so important for the listener to hear, because remember, consonants tell you what the words were. You see how this all plays together. So there's two things that happen with sensory neural loss. And first, with anybody, lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. That's just because of the shape of the traveling wave. Okay? But the second thing is you've lost the sharpness of the traveling wave peaks. And so now you can't tell the difference between frequencies close together anymore. You've lost that frequency resolution, remember? And so the hearing aid wearer has a harder time separating speech from background noise than would the normal hearing person. So there's two devils stacked against hearing aid wearers. One is the natural upward spread of masking, and the second one is the loss of outer hair cell action sharpening the traveling wave peaks. So now let's go to our notes and see what we've covered in our notes. escape out of here and go to the notes. All right, look at this. Psychophysical tuning curves show the required intensity to mask a signal. What the heck is that? Don't mix that up with eighth nerve tuning curves, although they look kind of similar. Psychophysical tuning curves show the required intensity to mask a signal. Like the traveling wave, eighth nerve tuning curves, they are also asymmetrical. As you change the frequency of the masker, it becomes less and less efficient. You must change its intensity. We'll show you a picture of it. Psychophysical tuning curves are behavioral and are shown by masking experiments. Eighth nerve tuning curves are not really behavioral. They're a neural phenomenon done in research. You and I never mess with that stuff, okay? These behavioral masking tuning curves match the shape, however, of neural fiber tuning curves. So, psychophysical tuning curves show the upward spread of masking. Let's look at a picture of it. Okay, let's go to a picture. Here you go. And I'll make this larger so you can see it more better. All right, I want to make sure that our microphone is still going here, though. Yep, I'm paranoid because we had some missed sessions for a while. So, okay, so look at this picture here. Now, if I can kind of move this bar, let's see if I can kind of get this out of the way because it bothers me. Let's see if I can kind of, there we go. Good. Frequency along the bottom. And you can see a 1000 hertz tone, that little blue line is a beep, is a tone. Pretend that's a soft tone. Beep. Now, look at the thing surrounding it. That's a narrow band of masking noise. A narrow band of masking noise to surround the signal. Okay? And notice when we make that narrow band of noise just a little bit louder than the signal, it covers or masks the signal. Okay? Now, let's say you're still playing that signal, but you're trying to mask that signal with a lower frequency masking narrow band of noise. So let's say you're trying to mask 1000 hertz with a 500 hertz with a band of noise surrounding 500 hertz. You'll note that I need to make this band of noise more intense so that it can mask the signal here. And if I try and mask this 1000 hertz tone with a 250 hertz narrow band, so say a narrow band of noise surrounding 250 hertz, I'm going to have to make that narrow band of noise more intense so that it can mask that signal. And if I take an even lower frequency, a narrow band of noise surrounding an even lower frequency, I have to make it even more intense so that it can mask the signal. Now, what happens if I try to mask the signal with a higher frequency narrow band of noise? Well, then I've got to go to the moon. I have to make that narrow band of high frequency noise really intense so that it can mask that signal. So we're always talking about this one signal and how can we cover it. The most efficient masker, narrow band of noise, surrounds the frequency in question because it doesn't need to be, follow my cursor, as intense. So look at the words surrounding the axes. Frequency and the decibels required to mask this 1000 hertz signal. So if I have a narrow band of noise surrounding 1000 hertz, I don't need to make that narrow band of noise much louder than the 1000 hertz tone in order to cover it. But if I move away from 1000 hertz and try to mask that 1000 hertz tone with other frequencies, I've got to make them progressively more intense as I move away in a lower direction. But if I move away in a higher direction, I really have to make it more intense. So that if you connect the lines here, if you connect the little towers, you can see you have a sharp point and an asymmetrical shape again. Weird, huh? It's like neural eighth nerve tuning curves and psychophysical masking tuning curves are quite similar in shape. They're both asymmetrical. So these guys that you studied last week, are asymmetrical. Traveling waves are asymmetrical. And upward spread of masking experiments show asymmetrical shapes. Now, if you've got hearing loss, damage to outer hair cells, look what happens here. It got elevated. Okay, look at the red. And now look at the normal one, the black. Normal, red. Okay, why? Because you had outer hair cell damage. So now you need more intensity to hear the 1000 hertz tone. Yep, you got to make it more intense because you got hearing loss. And then now you're going to mask that 1000 hertz tone with a narrow band of noise surrounding 1000 hertz. And if I try and mask 1000 hertz with other narrow bands of noise, look, I don't need to make this one much more intense to mask that signal. And I don't need to make this one that much more intense. I got to make them more intense to mask the 1000 hertz tone, but the differences aren't as dramatic as they were with normal hearing. Okay, so just like the traveling wave and just like eighth nerve tuning curves, they're asymmetrical in shape. Okay, and that's why people with sensory neural hearing loss are more easily masked. They've got the upward spread of masking, but because the traveling wave has lost its points, that damage is reflected further up the system in the eighth nerve, showing eighth nerve tuning curves are more dull and rounded as well. And that's shown even further in experiments of masking, which point in the same direction. The person is more easily masked by other frequencies. And this is all what happens due to cochlear sensory neural hearing loss. And that's why it's so different from vision loss. Vision loss is so simple in a way. Classes. The retina is fine, and the retina is the cochlea of the ear. And in vision loss, the retina is just fine. It's not ruined at all. It's just that the eyeball is too long or too short, so light isn't properly focused on the back of the eye, namely the retina. And the retina changes light into electricity, just like the cochlea changes sound into electricity. So, but in our field, it's the cochlea itself that's damaged. So the person has more difficulty distinguish between frequencies together. The person experiences the upward spread of masking like everyone does, but the person is also more easily masked. Okay, what the sounds he or she is hearing are more easily covered by other frequencies, precisely because of what is shown in these tuning curves, in these psychophysical tuning curves. So these are psychophysical tuning curves, and they're similar in shape to eighth nerve tuning curves, showing how the eighth nerve is tonotopic. So there's three things: the traveling wave, eighth nerve tuning curves, and psychophysical tuning curves. The traveling wave is more dull and rounded with outer hair cell damage. The eighth nerve tuning curves show more of a dull and rounded shape as well, so each fiber is no longer as finely tuned to one frequency anymore. And thirdly, in real life, the person is more easily masked. Look at the difference between the black and the red. The blue is the signal heard in this case. So if I go over to here and go up, a normal hearing person, hearing loss, and look at the comparison. Okay, now let's look at our notes and see where we've come so far. Share and share notes. So we'll escape out of here and go to the notes. There we go. And read. Psychophysical tuning curves show the upward spread of masking. Asymmetry of tuning curves shows that lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. Yeah, look. Share. And look at the tuning curve. Lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. The best masker surrounds the signal. The second best maskers are lower than the signal, and the worst ones to try are higher than the signal. So lows mask highs better than highs mask lows. That's shown here, and it's shown here and here. Okay, back to the notes. Just as eighth nerve tuning curves are a reflection of the asymmetrical traveling waves, so also are psychophysical tuning curves. Reduced frequency resolution due to sensory neural hearing loss causes psychophysical tuning curves to lose their points and become more rounded. Where have we heard that before? Poorer frequency resolution means the signal will be more easily masked. For sensory neural, not conductive, Cochlear responds more similarly to maskers of different frequencies. Rounded traveling wave causes rounded eighth nerve tuning curves. Rounded eighth nerve tuning curves in turn cause rounded psychophysical tuning curves. Background noise is the most common masker. High frequency consonants of speech are most easily masked. No wonder those with sensory neural hearing loss are so bothered by background noise. Hearing aids cannot sharpen a biological peak in a rounded, passive traveling wave. So there. Take a breath. All right. Now let's talk about the width of these guys. Let's go over to here. How wide are these? Let's kind of move to a different topic. Similar, we're talking masking, but here we're going to bring in a topic about a guy by the last name of Fletcher. Fletcher, the bottom of your notes on that page 1, critical bandwidths. So here we go, critical bandwidths. Let's kind of escape for a second, and we're talking about these guys. Okay, critical bandwidths. And I'll go back to here once we look at our PowerPoint. So Fletcher was an experimenter in the 1900s, and he tried to experiment with masking. Say you're hearing 1,000 hertz tone, and he would cover that 1,000 hertz tone with a broad band white noise. If he made that broad band white noise just a tad louder than the signal, it would cover or mask the signal. All right, so masking signal with broadband noise takes some X amount of dBSPL to mask the signal. So we'll just call that X, whatever that is. Notice it's covering the signal. But then Fletcher tried this. He tried to narrow it a little bit to still cover it, but it doesn't go quite all the way across anymore. He took some of the lows out and took some of the highs out, and it still worked. You tried a little more cutting. Just cut, take a little bit more out. It still worked. So look at that. This wasn't necessary. This stuff wasn't necessary. And hey, it makes it more comfortable because it's not as loud. Remember, look at this has got you got all the different frequencies are at some dB level. So this white noise might sound kind of loud to the person. So if you can get rid of some extra crap and still do the same job, great. So that's what he did. Oh yeah, look at this, still. His question was, how narrow can I make it so that it no longer masks the signal? Remember, the red and the green and the gold here are all broadband noise. And remember, the blue is a tone. Beep. And this is, okay? So he's narrowing the band. Narrower. Ooh, what happened here? He narrowed it too far, and the noise, whoa, now more dBSPL was required to mask the signal. Look at that, the black went up. Okay, go here. This worked, the red worked at X, so I'll leave my cursor right there. If I move to the next slide, whoo, see? Cursor here, no longer enough. He had to, when he made the narrow band of noise really narrow, he had to boost up the intensity of the narrow band of noise so that it would still cover the signal. That's what's meant by critical bandwidths. Critical bandwidths. How narrow can you make the band of noise before it no longer efficiently covers up the signal anymore? Okay, that was Fletcher's question. So it looks like this red was the critical band. When you made it narrower, now you had to boost up the intensity. You get it? All right. And critical bandwidths are used in our field all the time. How does this relate to our field? Just like this. Okay? When we use masking noise in audiometry to keep the good ear busy, guess what? We're using critical bandwidths. Okay? We're using critical bandwidths. When you're testing at 1,000 hertz in the bad ear, the noise you're putting into the good ear is a narrow band that surrounds 1,000 hertz. When you're testing someone's hearing at 2,000 hertz in the bad ear, the narrow band of noise put into the good ear automatically surrounds 2,000 hertz. When you're testing this ear with 500 hertz, to see its sensitivity here, the noise you're putting into the good ear to keep it busy is a narrow band of noise surrounding 500 hertz. And this is all automatically done by the audiometer. As soon as you choose the frequency of the tone to test in the bad ear, the masking noise automatically is a narrow band of noise used to keep that good ear busy at that frequency. And that's how Fletcher and critical bandwidths actually play out in the application of hearing tests in our field for the hearing instrument specialist. So let's go to our notes now, see where we are, and read what we got. Masking with wide band white noise is not very efficient. Narrow band noise makes a more efficient masker. This is the critical band theory. And what do I mean by efficient? Lots of side frequencies aren't even necessary. You could cut, and you still were able to mask the signal. According to Fletcher, the term critical band refers to internal blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you can think about that. It's just kind of, this is all kind of like blah, 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 blah. You can read it if you want, FNO for nerds only, or freak not out. I'll never ask it. Okay, but you can kind of look at it just for fun. The Cochlear has about 24 critical bands side to side. And the width is commonly referred to 1/3 octave bands. We'll get to that in just a sec, but don't freak. In general, the width of a critical band is proportional to its center frequency, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Fletcher masked tones with broadband white noise and gradually narrowed it, and he found only a narrow band of noise frequencies actually contributes to the true masking of the tone. When you made it, all the additional frequencies on the sides didn't really contribute to the masking efficiency. They just added more sound pressure level and ugly loudness. The most efficient masker produces the greatest threshold shift with the least intensity. And that's what's shown here in your PowerPoint slides. Way down. Move on down, move on down, move on down. There you go. All this kind of stuff here ain't necessary. Look at this. The level didn't need to be made any louder when you cut out some stuff from the sides, cut out more from the sides, cut out more from the sides, but only up to a limit. So I guess the red must be the critical bandwidth. In our field, and what we know to be true is critical bands are about 1/3 of an octave in width. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's just talk turkey here. Let's say you have a 1,000 hertz tone, okay, and you're using a 1 octave bandwidth. That would mean if I covered the 1,000 hertz tone with a band of noise, the band of noise may end up at 1,400 hertz here and be at 700 hertz here. So I'm surrounding 1,000 hertz, and the high end of the noise is exactly double the low end of the noise. Okay, so if I'm masking 1,000 hertz with a band of noise surrounding 1,000 hertz, from 700 to 1,400 hertz, that's a 1 octave bandwidth. That means that the highest frequency is double what the lowest frequency is. Okay, so say the signal's 1,000 hertz, my narrow band, if it was a 1 octave bandwidth, it would stretch from, say, 700 hertz to 1,400 hertz. 1/3 octave bandwidths are just narrower. In general, critical bandwidths are 1/3 of an octave wide. All that means is that the bandwidth isn't exactly 1 whole octave in width, because remember, an octave is a doubling of frequency. So it's not on 1 octave. Well, let's say if this is 700 hertz and the high end is 14, that's double 7, okay? 007. Okay, so that's a 1 octave bandwidth. The critical bandwidths are actually about 1/3 of an octave width. Okay, and that's what we're showing, and that's what Fletcher showed here. PowerPoint. Whoa, that's a strange PowerPoint slide. There you go. Looks like this. So critical bandwidths are in general about 1/3 of an octave wide. Enough on that. That's all I care about. Let's go to finish this Zoom session. The last thing, and you've heard this before. Speaking of masking, remember the cocktail effect? Why do you have 2 ears? Okay, you have 2 ears for several different things. 3 different reasons that we can think of right now. You have 2 ears, I'll stop sharing, for binaural summation. That's the first one, right? If this ear hears at 10 dB, this one hears at 10 dB, binaurally, my hearing threshold is 5. 2 ears are about 5 dB better than 1. Remember, if you have deaf in 1 ear, please don't think you have a 50% hearing loss. You have about a 5% hearing loss. The main reason you have 2 ears is reason number 2. Aside from binaural summation, localizing the direction of sound. Remember? And that's all done by the superior Oliveri complexes of the cochlea that I drew for you before. Cochlea, 8th nerve, cochlear nucleus, superior Oliveri complex, superior Oliveri complex. See the crossover? That's the first area. That pair of nuclei is the first area to get info from both ears, because crossover in the low brainstem occurs there. Remember that? Okay. So those 2 crazy little nuclei are comparing the time of arrival and the intensity differences between ears. So if you were talking from my side here, this ear is going to hear you a little bit louder, and this ear is also going to get the sound of your voice a split second earlier. Remember? And we use tiny time differences between the ears to localize the direction of low frequency sounds, and we use tiny intensity differences between the ears to localize the direction of high frequency sounds. Because high frequency sounds, we can't use time differences because highs, the wavelengths are shorter than my head, and they can't bend around my head. Okay, highs bounce, lows bend. All the stuff, keep it in there. Okay? Low frequency sounds are longer, so they can wrap around my head, and I can use tiny time differences as my cue. By the time you get above 2,000 hertz, sound waves are no longer more than a couple inches long. And they aren't long enough to bend around the head. So therein lies localization, the second reason you got 2 ears. And the third reason you have 2 ears is the cocktail effect. And remember, your 2 ears are comparing the signal, speech you want to hear, and the 2 ears are comparing the noise. So there's 4 things happening. Signal to this ear, noise to this ear, signal to this ear, noise to this ear. 4 things being compared. If you got 1 ear, there's nothing to compare. You got the signal and the noise here, but you can't compare it to anything here. That person's going to have a hard time hearing in noise. And we also said, if the signal is identical in phase to both ears and the noise is identical in phase to both ears, you're also going to have a hard time hearing. the signal. So what you want is for something to be different. If the signal is slightly out of phase between the two ears and the noise is the same, you can still hear the signal better. Or if the signal is the same in both ears and the noise is a little bit different in phase between the ears, you can still hear the signal better too. And that's the example I gave you before of a pilot in a little airplane listening to the tower, and the cockpit noise is really loud, and she's trying to hear what's coming from the tower. Sometimes that pilot will take off a headphone and stick it here. Why? To make something different. The noise is identical, but the signal is only in the one ear. The person hears it a little bit better. The cocktail effect. Okay, so let's take our final parting shot and look at a picture of the cocktail effect. And then we're done. And that would be this here. If everything is identical, the person will not be happy. If something is a little bit different, here the noise is signals out of phase between the ear. The noise is identical. This person's got only one ear, he's not happy. And this person here is happy because, like the pilot, okay, he removed something. So the noise here is identical in this case, but the signal's only in one ear. And you can think about that as the pilot in the little Cessna airplane that's loud. This is another picture showing you the same thing. Same noise, same pure tone to both ears, tone detection's poor. Pure tone inverted in one ear, tone detection's good. Pure tone removed from one ear, tone detection still good. My picture. Signal, and the signal here is in italics, so something's different, person's happy. Signal and signal are identical, but noise in italics here, noise in not italics here, something's different, he's happy. Noise in both ears, signal in one ear, he's happy. Everything identical, he's not happy, and a one-eared person, he's not happy. So basically that would be the end of the PowerPoint. And looking at the notes, because we're talking masking, you can call it binaural masking level difference. Just like the cocktail effect, we hear signals and background noise with two ears rather than one. This has implications for hearing aids and for listening and background noise. The cocktail party effect, discriminating noise sounds in a complex acoustic environment due to the sound source's spatial separation. The phase of the signal and the noise in one ear is compared to the phase of the signal and noise in the other ear. The masking level difference test. That's why this is covered again in this section. Okay, you've heard this before at the end of Unit 4. Now in Unit 6, we're just kind of briefly taking a peek at it because they experimented it. They discovered the cocktail effect by use of this masking level difference test. They would put in a tone that was usually below 1500 hertz, and they would find the masked thresholds for that tone in masking noise. When both the noise and the tone were presented binaurally at the same dBSPLs, detection wasn't very good, and simply removing a tone from one ear made the tone easier to hear. Okay, pilots in World War II noticed this. Okay, and that's what I'm talking about. Hearing the signal in both ears, and that's what they were doing with an experiment. Beep, you're hearing a 1000 hertz tone. Beep, and then they're... And if everything was identical in phase between the ears, the person had a harder time hearing the tone. If they made something different, it was easier to hear the tone. It was also easier when they removed the tone from one ear. Okay? And that was called the masking level difference test. And the masking level difference test is the way that they discovered what we call the cocktail effect. Okay, so this essentially finishes your psychoacoustics. Okay, basically you're done now with acoustics and psychoacoustics. Unit 7 is different. It's kind of like the caboose on the end of a train, only trains don't have a caboose anymore, okay? Oh, brother. Anyway, it's like it's the tail end unit, and it's where we put things together regarding hearing aids. We'll be talking about hearing aids. I'll be having my little bag of hearing aids here. We're going to take all these puppies out and talk to you about them, and we'll show you in terms of mass and stiffness and everything else how non-electronic acoustic modifications occur in hearing aids. Totally different topic, but it uses elements that you've covered in your acoustics course. So in summary today, we looked at the upward spread of masking. We looked at a second type of tuning curve called a behavioral or psychophysical tuning curve, where we experimented and looked at the upward spread of masking as it actually occurs. And we learned that lows mask highs better than highs mask lows, and the trouble that can cause for hearing loss. We reviewed how the dull rounded traveling wave is echoed further up the system twice, once in eighth nerve tuning curves and the other one in psychophysical upward spread of masking tuning curves. We said how they're all asymmetrical. They all become more dull and rounded with hair cell damage. Then we looked at Fletcher's 1/3 octave bands, critical bandwidth. And lastly, we looked at the masking level difference test, which talked about the cocktail effect, or which helped explain to us the cocktail effect. And that's the third reason you got two ears. You can better hear the signal in noise. So a one-eared person has about a 5% hearing loss, difficulty localizing the direction of sound, and thirdly, a harder time hearing the signal, the speech, in noise. All right. We be done. I'll stop recording now.